You know, during midterm season where there's that one girl who has like a full face of amazing, stunning makeup, but then she's got her hair in a messy bun and like sweatpants? That's me right now. I haven't put up a bookish video in like a month, and I think the last wrap-up I made was for October. So I'm just gonna update y'all on literally every single book I've read so far in 2020. Also, right now I am participating in the Autistic Pride Readathon, which is held by Bex. I will leave all the information down below, and I guess I'll just tell you what I'm reading for it. There's prompts, I should have looked this up beforehand. There's prompts like sci-fi fantasy, short story, self-pub book, contemporary, romance, queer, own voices. There's definitely something I'm missing, but there's a bingo board. I will put the Twitter and Bex's blog post and everything in the description if y'all want to join in for this. I'm going to be reading The Gilded Wolves by Roshani Chokshi, No Man of Woman Born by Anna Mardoll. I don't think that's how you pronounce it, but I also have no clue how to pronounce it. And Queens of Geek by Jen Wilde. The group book is Failure to Communicate, I think, but I have not been able to get my hands on it because libraries are closed and my library does not have it available as an ebook, so anyway. On to every book I've read so far this year. So far, I've read 16 books, and 5 of them, weirdly, are nonfiction, which is wild. That's almost a third of everything I've read. And I don't read a lot of nonfiction, but I've been on a nonfiction kick recently. Like, I've been really, really enjoying them. I think all of them have been 4 stars or above, the ones that I've read. So I'm really enjoying nonfiction so far this year. I'm getting off topic. Let's jump into the wrap-up. So the first books that I read were all for the Swiftathon, which is a readathon that I hosted, along with Anna from Southern Reader, Maya from Macedify, and Charlotte, who does not have a YouTube channel, but is at Wildest Daylight on Twitter. And I will link my TBR and announcement for that, and also everyone else's info down below, even though it's been over for over 2 months, but that's fine. And basically, this was a readathon where all the prompts were inspired by Taylor Swift's most recent album, Lover. The first book I read for the Swiftathon was Her Royal Highness by Rachel Hawkins. I believe this is the second book in the Royals series, but it's a spin-off, so like you don't need to read them all, I think. Anyway, Her Royal Highness is about a girl who goes to Edinburgh for boarding school after a breakup with her girlfriend, and there she finds that her roommate is a princess, and it's basically just a cute, fun, contemporary FF romance, which if you are looking for a cute contemporary FF romance, I would definitely recommend this. I gave this book 3 stars, but like a high 3 stars, because honestly it wasn't anything special, and throughout the book there was such a big like hype from the main character about just the atmosphere of Scotland and the school, and it was never really fleshed out in the story, and I think most of the characters weren't fleshed out as well, but if you just wanted a cute, fun romance, then this book will certainly deliver on that. So the next book I read was not for a Swiftathon prompt, but I think I found it because Chapter Kate mentioned it in a video, I think, and that is Zenobia July by Lisa Bunker, which is the most adorable book. It is a middle school coming-of-age novel about a trans girl, and I gave it 5 stars. It is stunning. It's a very, very, like, fun coming-of-age story, but it also definitely has a huge focus on Zenobia being trans, and while it is, like, you know, for middle school kids, it's also certainly not shying away from difficult topics like being scared of being outed or having dysphoria. And it's also like the queerest book I've ever read. Like, Zenobia is raised by her 2 aunts. Their best friend Arlie goes by Z0 pronouns. One of Arlie's parents is also not part of the gender binary. I don't think it's specified. Zenobia's aunts have a friend who's a drag queen. There's a trans boy at the school, and it's not, but it's also like not just about Zenobia being trans. It's also so much about friendship and acceptance, and Zenobia has so many more characteristics than just being trans. Anyway, I loved it, and you should read it immediately. Back to Swiftathon prompts, I read What If It's Us by Becky, Albertalli, and Adam Silvera. I do not have good luck with these two authors. So I think I read this for the prompt of like, give an author a second chance, which, yeah, this, no. So from Becky Albertalli, I read Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda, and from Adam Silvera, I've read History Is All You Left Me, and they both die at the end. And they were all like meh, like I think like 3-star material. I think I gave History Is All You Left Me 4 stars, but that's because there was a line that was so comical and ridiculous near the end that I was like, you are getting an extra star for pure comedy's sake. Anyway, I gave this book 2 stars. It's fine. The book is fine. I don't know. If I'm reading a romance novel and I do not root for the main couple, I am sorry, but you have failed at writing a romance novel. There was no chemistry that I could find between the 2 main characters, and I didn't get the ending. What? And like, one of the things I hate the most in relationships, when I'm reading relationships in books, is dating drama due to failure of communication. Guess what this book is all fucking about? I will say though, this book, even though I gave it 2 stars, is definitely shows how both authors have actually gotten better at writing, because the side characters were actually like fleshed out and I could tell who was who in this one. And like overall, I think, even though I gave this 2 stars, I did think that this was actually an improvement from what the authors wrote previously, because the side characters were actually fleshed out in this book. What If It's Us is like a summer romance where they bump into each other and then they try to meet each other again, and it's vaguely creepy because it's like internet stalking and like getting a package label from the trash. It's a summer romance thing. Can you tell I did not care for this book? Then I reread my 4th favorite book of all time, again for the Swiftathon, and that is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And this book is so fun to come back to. Rereading this book is just like being wrapped in like an old cozy blanket. I loved falling back into Evelyn's mind. 5 stars, obviously. And just, it's so nice to reread this. So The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo is about Evelyn Hugo, who is like Marilyn Monroe level famous. And right now she's in her 80s. And she has contacted a magazine and says she wants one specific writer to write an article about her, as she is currently auctioning off her dresses for charity. And Evelyn's big like scandal of her career is that she has had 7 husbands. And so, since they're like 80, she's the only one that's still alive. And essentially the writer shows up and Evelyn's like, hey, I don't actually want you to write an article on me. I want you to write my biography. And we learn about Evelyn's life through these kind of 7 stages of these 7 husbands. And she is such a complex character, and I can't remember what the line is exactly, but it's like Evelyn knows how to have you like keep wanting more. And like how she strikes this perfect balance of telling you just enough, but you still want to know more of her. You still want to get more of her. And that is absolutely what this book delivers. The next book I was also not for the Swiftathon, even though this was still when the Swiftathon was going on. I think this is actually when Blackathon started, and I immediately fell off the wagon and ignored all the prompts as soon as it started. Whoops. Blackathon is an annual readathon during February, or Black History Month, held by Jessie from Bow Ties and Books, and also Lauren from the novel Lush. In the first year, Francina Simone joined them, but I believe she was too busy to join this year. And it's basically a readathon centered around reading books by Black authors featuring Black characters, and it is always super fun and interactive. Jessie, they're always like innovating and finding different ways to involve different parts of the community, and I love this readathon. I love them. And for that, for Blackathon, I started off with Let's Talk About Love by Kann. So the main character, Alice, is Black, asexual, and biromantic, and so much of this book is not just about, like, you know, romance, fun. It's also about Alice, like, again, this is like so many ace things I've felt of like feeling like not being enough to be in a relationship because of being asexual, but also from the experience of her as a Black girl, and then me, because I'm Asian, of feeling like not pretty enough or being sexualized in Western culture. And so I don't even know how to talk about this book. Basically, it hit me where it hurts, and I gave it 4 stars. And the 4 stars is because there are certain subplots that were happening that like never really went anywhere, and I didn't feel like felt fully resolved. And for some parts, these are supposed to be college students, and I felt like the writing and dialogue was a little bit juvenile for people of that age. We're jumping around a lot, but back to the Swiftathon. I read Circe by Madeleine Miller, and I read The Song of Achilles by Madeleine Miller as well last year. Loved it, freaked out over it. It is my 3rd favorite book of all time. I want stuff from this book tattooed on me. So, of course, I had to pick up Circe, and for this one, I gave it 3 stars. So, I believe Circe is an absolutely amazing character. And she might be the best definition of a strong female character in a fantasy book that I've read, because it's not about her being like, wow, powerful, I have magic and swords and stuff. It's about her being like, hey, I am learning and growing and becoming a better person, a stronger person. I've been heartbroken, and I'm still gonna choose to love. I'm still gonna choose to have faith. And I think that really is the definition of a strong female character. And Circe's character, I feel like I'm just saying Circe like Cersei Lannister, and actually I realize I don't know how to pronounce this character's name. I'm gonna just avoid saying her name now. Anyway, she grows so much through this story, and I mean, I'd call it a coming of age novel, except she's literally like immortal. And it's, I don't know, it was just so sweet, and I loved like how many different characters showed up, because, you know, every kid goes through the Greek mythology phase, and just seeing all of these different characters appear and be part of her story was so much fun. We get to watch her, you know, grow, we get to watch her learn to stand up for herself, and especially I love seeing the relationship between her and all the characters that show up, and how she learns from them, how she grows from them. And it was really fun. But it is a 3 stars just because there was nothing like that was like wowing or stunning about it in this book. And also just because there were so many subplots that I was just like, what did you do with them? What about the child? You're just gonna... The last book I read for the Swiftathon was The Electric Heir by Victoria Lee. I read an e-arc of this from NetGalley, so I did not read the completed version, but The Fever King was one, this is a sequel to The Fever King, which was one of my favorite books I read in 2019, and I gave this 5 stars. The beginning of this book made me want to throw it against a wall, and it shattered my heart, which, I mean, I was expecting it because Victoria Lee did that to me during The Fever King, but I didn't expect it to happen right from the beginning, okay? I I loved about The Fever King are the characters, the magic system, and the relationships. And this book continues to deliver on the complex characterization. And I've talked about before how I read The Fever King, and I didn't notice all these like little things that were like, there's one like big gay angst thing when you find out something about Dara, and like when I reread it, I could pick up all these little things. Or when people started discussing how like Lara was grooming someone, I like didn't notice until I read through it again, and I was like, oh, holy shit. And so that kind of complex characterization is still in this book, and the magic system continues to grow and evolve, and just the relationships. I love the main couple in this duology, and it is stunning, but there's also so much more than that, you know? It's like Ames and Bethany and how they interact, or Ames and Dora, Ames and Gnome, and just all these characters and their friendships, their relationships, their implicit trust in each other, and I just... And the ending was really sweet and satisfying, and I can't wait for the pre-order short stories to come out. Anyway, basically, Victoria Lee keeps ripping my heart to shreds, and I can't wait for her to do it again in her next book, A Lesson in Inventions, which is about dark academia, murder, lesbians. You heard me right. Another favorite that I reread was Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. This book is absolutely brilliant. I read it for the first time during Blackathon last year, and I had to read it again this year, and I love it so much. This book is told entirely in verse, and is about Will, who's a black boy, and his brother has just been shot and killed, and he knows who's done it. So he decides to tuck a gun into his jeans and go get revenge. And essentially, this story takes place over about a minute, and it starts when Will gets on the elevator to go down to the lobby of his apartment, and on every single floor, someone Will knew or knew of relating to gun violence gets on. It's just, this book is magnificent. It's stunning. I don't know how to talk about it, but basically every time I talk about this, I just say, like, the first time I read this book, I was like sobbing in bed at like 10 a.m. on a Sunday. This book is one I can't stop recommending. I think about 3 or 4 people have read it because I've been yelling at them to read it for ages, but like I recommend this book to everyone. It's so good. And it's just, I always want to reread it. Like after I'm done reading it, I want to read it again. Right now, talking about it, I want to reread it. I love it. And now we get to the very first book on my nonfiction kick, and that is On Fire by Naomi Klein. I love Naomi Klein. Like, absolutely adore her. Oh my god, this woman. She is an anti-war, anti-capitalist, anti-globalization environmentalist. And just, she's Canadian. She went to U of T, and she's written so many amazing books. I believe starting in 1999 with No Logo, which is about sweatshops, and moving to stuff like This Changes Everything, about capitalism and climate change, to like No Is Not Enough, which is about Trump and shock politics, and now to On Fire, which is about the burning need for a Green New Deal. And it is a series of essays that she's written throughout her life regarding climate change, capitalism, globalization, and I love her. I really, really love her. I gave this book 4 stars because it was more difficult for me to read this book than any of her other ones because it was a series of essays and articles, and that just did not vibe with me as well as her other books have. But I love how she writes. I love how she talks about things. And there's one article in this that I believe is a commencement speech she gave, and like, one of my dreams is to be able to meet and even work with Naomi Klein. Like, that is the dream. So, the Daisy Jones smaller paperback came out. And I caved and bought it. So of course, I had to commence a reread and annotate this book. And it's my favorite book of all time. I love it so much. And it's so fun to reread this. I love it the same amount every time I reread this. And there's also an interview at the end by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I have 2 tattoos with this book. I adore it. Yeah. I've never stopped talking about this book, but I don't know what else to say about it. Basically, this book follows Daisy Jones and the Six, which is a 70s rock and roll band, how they got started, how they got together, how they rose to fame, and why, at the peak of their career, in the middle of tour, they broke up. Like, basically a fictional Civil Wars. And I love it. It is told entirely in interview format, which I know did not work for a lot of people, but I adored, and the audiobook is even better. And it's really about the choices people make, about what they choose to do with their lives, who they choose to love, and who they choose to stay with, what they choose to stay with. And it's brilliant. Anyway, so at the end there's an interview with Taylor Jenkins Reid, and she says something about this that is, I just love it. Okay. We cannot trust the Daisy Jones of today to remember what she said and did in 1978. We can only listen to the stories she's been telling herself about it for the past 40 years. And I found that's the more interesting story. The stories people tell themselves about themselves. 5 stars. It's my favorite book. We'll never stop talking about it. Another environmentalist nonfiction book. This is Losing Earth, A Recent History by Nathaniel Rich. Sorry for the glare, this is borrowed from the library, which is closed indefinitely, so it's mine indefinitely. And this I read because it was mentioned on Fire when it was still just an article and not a full, like, published, fleshed out book. And this talks about something I knew about, which was how, like, governments and big oil knew about climate change and fossil fuels and didn't do anything about it. And I knew about it, I just didn't know the extent of which it was, and how early people had been noticing effects of climate change. And it's mind-blowing. Honestly, like, what the fuck, people? And I've recently decided that I want to go down this route. Like, I want to go into, like, sustainability management. And so reading this just really drives me further into that. It makes me want to work harder and work more for it. I don't know how to review nonfiction, but I gave this 4 stars because it doesn't read like a textbook. It really reads like a story, but I think like, it's not like a wowing 5 stars. Again, I knew about how much people had done, but I never knew how close we were to getting change, or how much change had actually been done before stuff reverted again. And just, if you want to read about a history of the climate movement, read this. Yeah. I finally finished the Arc of a Scythe series by reading The Toll. This is the 3rd book and final book of Neal Shusterman's trilogy, and I gave it 3 stars. And I'm going to make a full review about this series, because, frankly, what the fuck? Those are my only feelings about this series, is what the fuck? Okay, I read Scythe. I gave it a solid 4 stars. Nothing happened until the end, and the pacing was killing me. Like, I was like, I am going to have to stop reading. It took me over a month to finish this book because it was so slow, so I wasn't motivated to continue. I think I read 3 books, like, started and completed 3 books while reading this book because it was so infuriating. Like, trying to get through Scythe was honestly worse than trying to read through Jane Eyre, and Jane Eyre was a lot. So, but stuff happened at the end of Scythe, so I was excited for Thunderhead. Thunderhead, everything kept happening, so there was no time to stop and think about anything. And the toll just came in with an ending that was like foreshadowed, but still made me go, what? But why? And how? Basically, the characters grew in the first book and then stopped growing. The relationships didn't go anywhere. And the main relationship was expected and unwanted, and I wasn't mad about it until the toll, because they were so devoted to each other, but it was very like insta-lovey, and there was no reason for them to be that devoted to each other. And I was just, like, the more I read in this series, the less I cared about it. And just, basically, this wasn't a satisfying end for the characters, and it wasn't a satisfying end for the series. Which I know is really shitty to say, especially because so many people enjoyed this book, but no. Just no. I will say though, my baby Grayson is still killing it. I loved Grayson in Thunderhead, even though some people did not like him. I adored him, and he is still doing amazing in the toll. Love him. Another nonfiction book. I read Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski, which is a book about sex and female sexuality and biosex female. She does mention at the start that it is focused on biosex female because there's just not enough research done in regards to trans women, and so she was like, yep, this is just gonna focus on this because frankly the science isn't there, and she didn't want to give like misleading information. But this book is great. I give it 4 stars. There are so many things people don't tell us about sex. And I learned so much from reading this book, not just about like, you know, like sex and orgasms and all that fun stuff, but also like about attachment styles, connection, about like accelerators and inhibitors with stress and stuff, and how like nothing happens in a vacuum in regards to your body, and you have to apply the context to it. And I was literally taking notes as I read this book because it had so much information, and it was honestly so lovely to read. And also, how can you not like a book whose cover is a pseudo-vagina? We have to stan. I did a read with me for this next book, which I literally read it in one sitting, and it's another nonfiction, and my professor wrote this book. It is Caught Up, Girls, Surveillance, and Wraparound Incarceration by Jerry Flores. I gave this 5 stars. So this book focuses primarily on Latinx girls and follows them basically, so Flores basically follows them in the study from prison and then to like a school you go to before you go back to normal school. And I think the school's called Legacy, something like that. And basically how it works to keep you continuing in the prison system, continue to be incarcerated, and how hard it is to go back into like a traditional school system and traditional life. And this also is a nonfiction book that doesn't read like a textbook, it reads like a story. And he focuses on specific girls and how they got to where they are, and also what helped them get out or what didn't help them get out. And I'm a sociology student, I'm a criminology student. This is my shit, okay? I love reading about books like this. And I knew a lot of what this was going in because he's my professor, and also because I took another class that was very related to this. But there was so much also that I didn't know about it, and it was just, I don't know, again, this is my shit. I really liked reading about it. But also, I really liked reading about my professor. Because like, he's a super chill dude in class. And so this definitely exudes that. And he talks about also what it's like to be, and how careful he has to be as a male study person studying girls. And how he created boundaries, and also like how he, as like an indigenous Mexican dude, like how he got to where he is now, you know, like with a doctorate as a professor at a university. This book has such a refreshing intersection of like race and class and gender and sexuality. And also, it also touches on like how these girls will wield their sexuality to try to get benefits for themselves. And I don't know how to review nonfiction. I gave it 5 stars. This is my shit. I liked reading it. My prof wrote it. Don't know what else to say. Another nonfiction book I gave 5 stars is Becoming by Michelle Obama. I listened to the audiobook and it was so good. She narrates it and it's wonderful. This book is not just about her experiences, but it also really talks about her perspectives and how she gains them from how she grew up, where she grew up, her family, stuff like that. And I loved that. And one part of the story is how she talks about how she got a law degree and then found out she didn't really want to be a lawyer. And I wanted to do law school, but now have fallen deep, deep, deep into the environmental world and now realize that that's what I want to do with my life. So that really resonated with me, which I was not expecting in this. I also really loved like how she talks about becoming an Obama and being first lady. I don't know, this book is just so wonderful, and as someone who's always admired her, this book feels like getting advice from her. Because again, the audiobook is narrated by her, she's talking to you, and it's so fun and hopeful, and it's definitely like one of my comfort reads now. Which is strange to say about a nonfiction, but it definitely is. Last book of this wrap-up. Okay. One of my favorite fantasy tropes is gender-affirming prophecies, okay? Like, for example, the headcanon that in Harry Potter, you know how boys can't go into the girls' dormitory because it'll turn into like a slide? And a trans girl going up that and being able to get up that? Yes, this is the kind of thing that I love. You know what's a book that's all about that? No Man of Woman Born. This is a collection of fantasy short stories entirely centered around trans and non-binary characters. And it's so good, it's so good. So, I've never had good luck with short stories. I think one of the huge parts of why I enjoyed this book so much was that the author wasn't scared to like flesh out full-on fantasy worlds in these short stories. Like they each had their separate world and lore, and the author wasn't afraid to just like go big with it. And also like the stories didn't necessarily have like a beginning, middle, end. Maybe it was just beginning and middle. Maybe it was just the middle. It didn't have to have the ending. You could imply the ending or let the reader imagine what would happen afterwards. And I think that was what made the short stories work for me so much in this book. Beyond just, you know, the gender-affirming prophecies, it was so good. It would be like, no man or woman can do this, and this person's like, bitch, I'm non-binary, haha! Or, like, only a woman of this lineage will be able to do this, and this family has been trying to have a girl for so long, and trans girl, bitches. Or like, you know, fae, who are like, tell me your name. No, I don't want your given name. I want your chosen name, because that's your real name. My heart. And just, they're just, and like, these stories are not, I don't just love them because they are trans and non-binary characters with gender-affirming prophecies. Like, that's fucking great, but these are also just fucking good stories, okay? And just, like, this also has neo pronouns in it, which like, I didn't know there were so many types of neopronouns, and so, like, learning about all these while reading, and there's so many parts of the, and the author, definitely read the author's intro if you're going to read this book, because it's a great intro. It talks about how, in Macbeth, Shakespeare says, like, no man of woman born can kill Macbeth. And then it's like, it's Macduff because he was from his mother's womb untimely ripped. And it's like, bitch, you could also just have had a woman do it. That kind of thing. So that's kind of where the premise of this book is, and it's so good. It's so good. I'm gonna shove this book down your throats so often. I'm gonna talk about it more than Daisy Jones. Okay, that might not be possible, but I'm gonna talk about this so much. I need my own copy. I need to own it and then give it to people to read. This is... I was like fully, like smiling like a psychopath while reading this book. Also, I read this for Autistic Readathon, which I mentioned at the beginning, but just thought I'd mention it again. I've been filming for like an hour now, but those are all the books that I have read so far in 2020. I will link everything about the Autistic Readathon down below. Please go check it out if you are so inclined. Please read No Man of Woman Born because it is so good. Yeah, that's all I have to say. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope y'all are staying safe and that you're having a good 2020 so far, or as good as can be expected right now. And I will see you sometime. Goodbye.